Jenny, coach and NLP practitioner, helping people find confidence, build communication skills and design a life that they love. We have to talk. Those fateful words, the words that so many people dread in a relationship. We have to talk. And this time, weirdly, it was coming out of my own mouth, which was a bit shocking. Up until even that moment, I didn't know we were going to have this conversation. And it all started on a Saturday morning, completely out of the blue. My kids were, well, our children were at their grandparents', and I woke up in the morning. My husband was on the phone with work, as he often was, and I went for a shower. And by the time I got out of the shower, I could hear the pots and pans crashing around downstairs as he was putting the dishes away. And I thought, oh, at the very least, we should be having a cup of tea, surely, together. And so I went downstairs and we had a bit of an argument about financial things. And then we went into the living room and he went to switch on the telly and I said, we have to talk. At which point he said, I don't want to talk about money and all that kind of stuff at the weekend. And I said, no, we have to talk about the fact that we've got no relationship. That was the response. That. So it was the big elephant in the room that we'd been ignoring for such a long time. And just like that, our 16-year relationship and 11 years of marriage was pretty much over. We'd decided that we weren't, almost in an instant, going to be a couple in that way anymore. Except, of course, it wasn't the end because we still have children to bring up. And at that point, we were still really close friends and we had a real sibling relationship. But it was getting more and more destructive by the day. And we wanted to stop that in its tracks. We wanted to preserve the relationship that we did have. We didn't want to become the arguing couple that ended up hating each other. So we made an agreement. And it's weird how there was just nothing special about that day at all. It was just one of those moments in time where we realised just all the mundane, normal stuff going on that we'd grown apart. A few months before that, I had found a hobby that I really loved doing. And within that hobby, I was getting quite a lot of attention from men, which, in all honesty, on hindsight now, looking back, I wish I'd just ignored it. But it was very hard to ignore something like that when I felt lonely all the time. I was just on my own all the time, and it just highlighted how far apart we were and that there was no turning back anymore. We didn't even try therapy. I went on my own, and for some reason I think we just both knew it was over and we didn't even bother going down the therapy route. And so it was a kind of a really strange time because I had started to find a new life. I had started to build stuff for me, but was still clinging on to an old life, and I was still very much kind of unsure about how things were going to look, how things were going to go. I was still incredibly fond of my husband, and everybody kept telling us that we couldn't have that sort of relationship going forward. So I was in complete turmoil. I was in therapy, and I started a new relationship fairly quickly and spent several years in that relationship. But even within that time, even though I was with somebody else, the shock of no longer being someone's wife or my husband's wife was quite painful. Like sometimes it would just hit me like a wave of, oh my goodness, I'm not his wife anymore. And what do I do? It was really, really strange. Even though I had taken the initial steps towards our decision, it really felt very unreal for a long, long time. And I guess that was quite understandable because I met my husband when I was 19 and we married exactly 5 years later. It was just before I turned 25. And never in my wildest dreams when I got married did I think that we wouldn't grow old together. It didn't cross my mind. And I knew that not everything was perfect, but we were absolutely a team. We were rock solid as a team, and I took pride in us being a team, and we functioned as a team. I supported him to get to where he wanted in his career, and I looked after the kids in the house and the life organising, and he went to work. And that was the deal that we had at that time. That was kind of what we sat down and we discussed it. And I agreed that I would move around the country and do all of the kind of day-to-day living things while he built his career to the point where he wanted it. So that was the deal we had at that point. So for quite a few years after, the deal was still the same. I still did the family stuff and looked after the kids and did all the house stuff. I was working as a minimum wage secretary in the cinema, which it was a job I enjoyed, but it was never going to be a career. And my husband went out to work and still provided financially for the family. So the deal was still there, but the team was not there anymore. It wasn't really the same. And I found that quite shocking because I really identified as being a wife. I loved it. I loved being a wife. And I look back and I think, well, what happened? And it was really weird. I think we spent so many years distracting ourselves. We moved several times around the country. He would go to work and he'd work very, very long hours, and not always necessarily. So like they weren't necessarily hours that he had to work, but he worked very long hours. And I said yes to most of the volunteering things that came up because I think we were just distracting ourselves. Found this new hobby where constantly he would come in, I would go out, he would come in, and we were just ships passing in the night. And eventually that day, when I say it wasn't a special day, and it wasn't a special day, and that's kind of why it happened that day, because I realised that we had spent years and years distracting, years and years paddling like heck, crazy people running around, had all these massive goals, and we did have massive goals, and we fulfilled a lot of those goals. And we got to that point where we'd fulfilled these really huge goals, and all of a sudden we stopped. And we looked around and we just went, oh my goodness, we've got to talk about the fact we've got no relationship now. Wow, how did we get there? So I look back and I can see how we got to that day almost 7 years ago. And it might have been different if I knew then what I know now. But isn't hindsight wonderful? And I wouldn't change anything about the life that I'm living now and working towards now. So what has happened within that 7 years? And we're still actually not divorced. Originally, because it was so amicable, we didn't file for a long time, and now it's not necessarily quite as amicable anymore. And so there's still things that need adjusting and tweaking and talking about. And when I said we made that deal, we did make that deal, but that has massive impacts for all of us moving forward. But the things that I know now is that I know so much more about myself. I didn't know who I was. I was so strong at identifying as being a wife and doing the right thing by them and my kids and everybody around me that really I didn't know who I was. And now I know who I want to be. And even if I'm not fully there yet, I know where I want to get to. And when I say I don't know, I'm not fully there yet, it's because every time we grow, we want to continue growing. So it's kind of a new perspective every time you have some growth. So I'm not there yet, but it's probably where I want to be is somebody that I wouldn't even have recognised or been able to imagine up 7 years ago. I communicate a lot better than I used to. I know how to manage my reactions much better than I used to. And I know how to maintain and create boundaries around me that work. And sometimes when we put in new boundaries around people, they find it difficult to deal with because they're not used to you doing that. But having strategies and structures in place for doing that is really helpful. I acknowledge the role I took in my marriage not working. And I have more confidence that I can do it, whatever it is, whether I'm on my own or with someone else. So I know that it's possible for it, whatever it is that I choose it to be, it's possible. And this is where I love to help my clients. So I love to build their confidence to the point that they know they can do it, whatever it is. I love to support them in creating the steps they choose to take and to have the life that they want. To know themselves deeply, and knowing yourself deeply involves the good and the bad. So we can't just know ourselves deeply and know all the good stuff. And we can't just know ourselves deeply and know all the bad stuff. And I think people get really invested in knowing the bad stuff sometimes. The kind of the, well, I've done this in the past, and then they beat themselves up, and it's that constant kind of bashing down of ourselves. So I think knowing yourself deeply means knowing the great stuff and the bad stuff. And there is nothing more powerful than knowing the whole of everything. So I'd love to ask how well you know yourself. And what parts are you hiding from that you don't really like, and you're just going, not really sure about that one. I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. And who would you love to be if you could choose who to be? And I very much believe that we can all choose who we want to be. So this is why I set up currently got a Facebook group, and it's Design Your Life After Divorce or Separation. And much as my group is called Design Your Life After Divorce and Separation, this could well be the same for somebody whose children have grown up and flown the nest and they don't know who they are. So it's really for people who have kind of lost their way and they don't know who they are anymore. And within the group, I'm going to help with confidence building, how to communicate better. There'll be some elements of dating in there for people that are interested in dating. We're going to have lots of expert speakers coming in and helping with all the various issues that come up when you don't know who you are and where you're going. And knowing where you're going is really important, because although that might deviate sometimes and you might not necessarily get there in a really straight line, if you don't have any aim at all, we're just kind of rudderless in the middle of the ocean. And I think that's where I was for a very, very, very long time. And I kept looking for the rudder and it wasn't there. So I hope this bit of insight into what happened with my marriage is helpful for you. Because I think we hear a lot of really bad, difficult divorce stories too, and separation stories. And I'm sure you've got your own. And I think it can also be quite, you think, well, I don't have it that bad. You know, my divorce was really amicable for a long, long time. And even if it's not particularly now, it's not unamicable also. You know, we were very civil with each other. And then I look around, people have had really tough times. So if you've had a really tough time, you probably need a lot of support and help to build and design the life that you really want, to remove a lot of old beliefs and feelings. So if you want to rebuild your life, you want to design it for how you want it, you've been through all these big changes and you're not really sure who you are, a great first step is to join my Facebook group. I will put the URL in the link below. Remember to hit the subscribes and the likes and the notification bells so you can hear more about my journey and my tips and tools and hacks to help people design the life that they really want to have, the life that they love having. Because I think a lot of us spent a lot of time out at sea, and then now we need to find our way and our direction. So I would love to help you do that within my group. Otherwise, if you want to do some one-to-one coaching, book through my website, which again, the URL will be along the bottom of this video. And we'll have a free 1-hour chat about how I can help you find the life that you're really looking for. And in the meantime, remember to have a really powerful day.